This constitutes a security hazard.
Back with more Gerry Anderson Dinky toys this week, but something a little bit different because they're Gerry Anderson, but not in the way that you might expect. This is the Dinky Armored Command Car and the Dinky Coast Guard Amphibious Missile Launch from the 1970s. Now you might be thinking, well, what about those is Gerry Anderson? They don't sound like Gerry Anderson vehicles. Well, let me tell you a little story about the Investigator. Oh yes, we're talking about the Investigator. You guys know I love talking about the Investigator. Well, if you're not familiar, in the 1970s, Gerry Anderson made a pilot film for a new Supermarionation series called The Investigator, which was shot on location in Malta and featured these vehicles, where it was puppets interacting with live action, interacting with real locations, and they would drive around Malta in a bright red car and a motorboat. And these vehicles were full-sized, puppet scale, but big old vehicles. And they were basically one of the main selling points of this pilot film. And the story goes that Dinky Toys, who had produced many other Gerry Anderson toys at that point, Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, Joe 90, even the Secret Service and UFO, they had enjoyed a good time producing Gerry Anderson toys. So Dinky, supposedly so enthusiastic about the prospect of a new Anderson show, that they immediately went into production producing toys based on the Investigator. Of course, what ended up happening is that the Investigator never materialized. It never became a TV show. It was never screened. Nobody ever saw it. Nobody ever heard of it. And Dinky were left in a position where they had these toys. They've gone into production, making the molds and everything, doing all the work to get these toys going. And then suddenly they couldn't release them because they didn't have a TV show to go with them. So, very, very cleverly, Dinky decided, well, we'll just modify the designs a little bit and just release them as their own thing. And in the case of the armored car, they even had the audacity to print on the box that this was a vehicle designed by Gerry Anderson. Of course, it wasn't actually designed by Gerry Anderson. I believe it was designed by Reg Hill. But still, Dinky was so keen, like, let's put the Gerry Anderson name on this. Please, can we put the Gerry Anderson name on this? But yeah, that's kind of the story of how these toys got made. So they're kind of Gerry Anderson toys, but they're not. And at the same time, they are based on Anderson vehicles that we never properly got to see in action. So Dinky made these, and they modified the designs to make them into their own thing. But there are little sort of telltale signs that these started life as Investigator vehicles, because if you actually get in and take the shells out and take a proper look at them, you can see inscribed in the metal, it says "Inv Car" on this one, for example. So that's how you know this started life as an Investigator vehicle, and it was then modified. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take you through each of these individually, and as well as a little extra something I have. Now, shout out again, I used this when I did my UFO Dinky vehicles video, but got to give a shout out to this book, which is the Fab Book of Gerry Anderson Dinky Toys, published by Fanderson, which has all the information you could possibly want to know about all of the Dinky vehicles. And indeed, I will be referring to that again when it comes to the Investigator vehicles. But I think they're tucked away at the back. So here we go, the Armored Command Car. So this was issued actually as late as 1976, which is really interesting to consider because the Investigator was produced in early 1973. So the fact it took them 3 years to get it, when you consider that they had obviously started producing these toys when the Investigator was still a viable option, the fact that it took them that long to then eventually put the vehicles on sale. It was issued in 1976, deleted in 1977. There's a very limited run, these toys. Yeah, basically, not too many variations of this. It was it came in green. I think it came in different packaging. Apparently, there was a metallic blue version, but I have never seen that before. All I have ever seen is this green version. So let's dig into this, because I think it's a really nice toy. That's the sort of tragedy of the whole thing is these would have been really, really good Investigator toys had they kind of gone all the way, but they didn't, sadly. So what you have, for all intents and purposes, is a green version. It's all solid green with just a few details picked out in silver paint, but not very many. And it's rendered in this dark sort of military green, and you can see the parts where there would have originally been aspects of the original red Investigator car, like on here on the back. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be a set of spare wheels that appears on the back of the vehicle, but instead they've put some jerry cans and an exhaust pipe and stuff like that. So, interesting to see, but I really love I like this as a toy. It's got a sort of indication of a winch at the back. It's got 8 wheels that spin freely like that. They've put a little figure inside, which is sort of generic military man that's just been sat at the steering wheel. But you could imagine like John and Julie sitting in the car together, although they might have only put John in there or Julie, I don't know. But looks like there's only really seating capacity for one, so who knows. But then again, those inlays, that's done in plastic, so maybe they had a bit more control over redesigning that interior to fit accordingly. Taking a quick look at the bottom of the car, this is indeed the Dinky armored command car made in England. And in terms of play features, this actually has quite a few. If you wind up the radar dish on the top, and then let me see if I'm remembering this right. If you put it down, and then there's a little switch on the side, flick that switch, and what it does is obviously the radar dish spins around, gets a bit stuck because of its age, but the radar dish goes round and round, and what that's doing is there's a little sort of flywheel in the front where, and it doesn't do it anymore sadly, but there's a hatch that opens in the front basically. And what it does is it spits sparks, like actual sparks out of the front of the car because of where the friction of the flywheel makes contact with this little thing in the front, and it's supposed to spit sparks out. Now, sadly, over the years, I think that has worn down to such an extent that it doesn't do it anymore. But it's still a nice feature that the radar dish can spin around by itself. And it's great that it has the little hatch in the front as well. That's really, really cool. I think that's great. As a play feature goes, I mean, how accurate that is to... Obviously, it's not at all accurate to what we see in the Investigator pilot film. You could argue maybe they were planning to put that feature on the car later in future episodes of the Investigator. Maybe we would have seen that. But as a toy play feature, I think it's fine. I think it's interesting. I've seen videos of it actually spitting the sparks, and it's quite impressive to say. I'm not really sure what practical purpose it serves, but it looks cool. It's exciting. I'm sure there were probably other toys at the time that did a similar thing that you probably wouldn't find toys doing that nowadays. But yeah, really interesting. So there we go. That's the Investigator car. Or should I say, sorry, the Dinky Toys armored command car designed by Gerry Anderson. The audacity to turn around and say, oh, designed by Gerry Anderson, even though you wouldn't recognize it from anything in particular. But there you go. But yeah, really nice. I like that. And then what is interesting about this one is that they actually didn't write designed by Gerry Anderson on the front. I actually have an original box for this. And as you can see, it's the Coast Guard Amphibious missile launch, Dinky number 674. And as you can see, the box art is really interesting because it alludes to things that I don't recognize. I think those are other, they're other Dinky boats. So this is sort of meant to be a continuation of that range of military battleships and stuff like that. They've sort of gone, we can take the Investigator boat and just modify it slightly so that it looks like it fits in with this theme. I think that's just very cheeky, but very, very very inventive. I mean, they made the best of a bad situation, really, when it came to the Investigator vehicles. And of course, the tantalizing thing about the boat is it doesn't look too dissimilar to how the boat ended up looking on screen. So you wouldn't have to do too much to modify this to make it look like what it looks like in the show. And of course, I should say, I've dropped my book, but people have done exactly that. People do take the car and strip the paint off and paint it red, and they, put the spare wheels on the back and things like that. So there are things you can do to modify the toys to make them look like what they look like in the Investigator, and people have done amazing work on that. I have never attempted it myself. I'm often been tempted. I don't have the handy skills that are needed in order to make custom Dinky toys, but yeah, if anyone wants to make one for me, go right ahead. But I also know that Dinky toys cost money, so I'm keeping these in their original condition for now. If I ever happen to come across a spare one of these, then maybe I will. Maybe I will make that leap, make that change. But anyway, this is the boat. As I say, it's pretty spot on to what we see in the show. The only real modification they've made is putting the Coast Guard label across the front of it. Obviously, it has wheels. Now, you might look at that and think, boat having wheels, that's a bit odd. Obviously, for a toy, that's a good function for it to have. But the thing is, the actual interesting thing about this is that the original model of the Investigator boat did also have wheels. They're never used in the pilot film, but if you look at pictures of the model, it has wheels sitting there underneath. So Dinky obviously weren't far off when they put wheels on their own model. But you can see it's got a little Coast Guard man sitting inside there, which I think is really cute. A feature which, again, is on the original model but never turns up actually in the Investigator pilot film is there is a rocket launcher on the front. And if we swivel this switch here, there you go, you get the rocket launcher, which I think is really, really cool. It's got a spring-loaded mechanism in there. I actually do have the missiles for this one, but they are sealed in plastic. And I don't know, I don't feel like losing these missiles today, so I'm not going to load them up. But there you go, you can see that those are the little plastic yellow missiles that would load inside of here. And I believe, I could be wrong, but is that a point for loading missiles as well? Do they go in there? Obviously they can go in the front, but I wonder if they can also, you can put two in the back. How interesting. I'd never really noticed that before. I could be wrong. Let me consult the book. I should consult the book. I should have done this before, knocking everything off the screen at the same time. I should have consulted this before, but now I'm looking at it. I'm curious to see what it can actually do. Yeah. I don't think that is a slot for firing missiles out, but it would be cool if it was, if you could shoot missiles out of that slot, but no, it doesn't look like you can. But anyway, yeah, that's a spring-loaded missile launch mechanism there as well. So there we go. Let me spin that back over. It's quite a heavy sort of mechanism in there. But yeah, really nice little toy, and yeah, loosely Gerry Anderson connected. But here's the real oddity of this whole collection. The thing that is really strange about this. I have this, which is a comic strip featuring the Dinky Coast Guard Amphibious missile launch. It's nothing to do with the Investigator whatsoever. They have taken the vehicle and told a unique story just about the boat. This is a page from a magazine or something. I want to say my dad got this off of eBay for me. I can't remember what the context was or anything, but he was just like, hey, look what I found. And I was like, sure, yeah. It's literally on the back of it got a comic strip about One-Eyed Jack. It looks like another sort of toy advert, really. But yeah, there you go. That's a very creative bit of advertising that they did for the Amphibious Coast Guard missile launch. You know, new model available in your toy shops now. I'm just like, wow, they were so unhappy with the Investigator that they didn't even take advantage of using it for advertising the toys. They came up with their own original story specifically about this boat, this version of the boat, the Coast Guard boat, and use that in advertising. I just think that's incredible. So that's a really nice kind of thing to partner up with these toys. But there you go. Overall, a really interesting little footnote in the sort of Gerry Anderson story and the Investigator story, which we all know I find very, very fascinating indeed. The fact that Dinky, the story goes that Dinky was so enthusiastic about the Investigator that they just went ahead and started producing toys, even though the show itself had not been commissioned. And I do wonder whether part of the thing that made the Investigator happen, honestly, was the toys. I do wonder whether that the pilot was made off of the strength of having those vehicles in it, having the toys made of it, whether that was part of what was going on behind the scenes, whether Dinky maybe were offering something of an incentive to get the Investigator made in the first place. I don't know. That's pure speculation. I have no idea. But it's just interesting to me how quickly they jumped into production on these vehicles, even though the Investigator never turned into a TV series. I just find that very interesting. And there's a lot of the documentation and the photographs that survive relating to the Investigator. There is a huge amount of material, like behind the scenes material, on the design of the vehicles. The vehicles were such a huge part of setting up that pilot film that it does make me wonder whether, again, the Dinky influence was there to try and make the Investigator happen. I don't know. Pure speculation. But if you're interested in more Investigator related material, if you want to find out more, on this YouTube channel, I did a video in conversation with Peter Borge, where I had the privilege of being able to interview Maltese actor Peter Borge, who played Christoph in The Investigator over 50 years ago, and talking through some of his memories of working with Gerry Anderson on that little show, and also learning more about the history of Maltese television and film in general and how the Investigator kind of fitted into that. Really, really good fun. I love making that video. It's one of my favorite videos that I've ever done. So go and take a look at that, because it really, really, if you're interested in the Investigator and the weird little way in which it was almost a show but wasn't, go and take a look at that. Also head over to my blog, because I've got some good Investigator material on there as well. So there you go. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Security Hazard Minis. Please subscribe if you're not already, and otherwise I will see you in the next video. Until then, take care.
Security hazard negative.